Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. We want to welcome you to our program today, How to Avoid Failing as an Always-On Marketer. I'm Tom Murphy, General Manager and Editorial Director for CMS Wire and Simpler Media Group. My focus areas include collaboration, analytics, customer success, and other areas. I'm also the author of Web Rules, How the Internet is Changing the Way Consumers Make Choices. We have a simple agenda today. After my introductions, which should take less than 5 minutes, we'll have Jack Lynch with us and then Seths joining us later in the program. Finally, we'll have a live question and answer period. This is where you're the stars. Please think about your questions all through the program and ask them when you can. To submit your questions, you can use the WebEx tool on the right. You'll see a Q&A tab on the right side or at the top of the page, and submit your questions there, or you can send them in through Twitter at CMSWire. The WebEx chat is simple to use. It's also on the right column. And simply use the pull-down menu to direct your note to the proper person and write it in the field below, then click Send. Q&A tab, as I explained, has a similar function. Send your questions to all panelists and then put it in the bottom and click the Send button. We'll be having some interactive polls during this program. You'll see a polling window pop up on the right side of your screen, and you will see radio buttons there to select your answers. And please remember to click the Submit button. We really want everybody to participate in the polls. They're very helpful to our presenters to know a little bit more about our audience and to get your participation in the program. A little about CMS Wire. We're about 11 years old. We have well over 300 editorial contributors. Our key services include we publish more than 200 articles a month, many of them by practitioners like you. We have monthly editorial themes, tweet jams, hangouts, and webinars like customer experience, digital marketing, and much more. Today's presentation is sponsored by Adobe and Razorfish. Adobe, as you know, is the global leader in digital marketing and digital media solutions. You can learn more about their tools and their services at adobe.com. Razorfish is a full-service digital agency at the intersection of creativity, media, and technology. They create experiences that build business. Look for them at razorfish.com. Now let's get into the main part of the program. I'd like to introduce our speakers. Jack Lynch is Vice President of Data Sciences at Razorfish. He has 2 decades of experience in marketing technologies and analytics, has visited all 7 continents, and spent 2 months in Antarctica. We'll have to talk about that offline sometime, Jack. Also joining us in today's program will be Seths. He's on the data sciences team at Razorfish and helps clients prioritize their technology investments. He has developed roadmaps that enable their data-driven marketing. I'm now going to hand it over to Jack, who will lead us through the first part of the program.
Thanks, Tom.
Jack, you are now in control.
Thanks, Tom. And thanks for the introduction. It's although I'm not really sure I like that 2 decades. It sounds like a very long time. But thanks for having us, for letting us speak here, and thanks everyone online for attending. Data-driven marketing or always-on marketing is a pretty hot topic lately. I know I've had numbers of conversations, and I think the interest that we saw in this webinar validates how important this topic has become and the level of interest in it recently. So just a couple quick mentions about us. Razorfish, we're here for tomorrow, which really doesn't mean very much to people. But Tom mentioned that we are at the convergence between brand and technology, and that's something that Razorfish has done since our inception. We've been around almost 20 years now, and from the very beginning of digital marketing, we recognized that technology was going to be the cornerstone of it, and invested heavily in the technology side in addition to the creative and experience pieces. And that really shows that technology lives at the center of it. When we've done a number from the very beginning, we've been working on data-driven experiences, but that has grown to a level now that we've had the opportunity to bring data-driven marketing to every channel, starting from media to experience sites to mobile. We've been fortunate enough to work with some companies on large implementations, and I think that gives us a unique perspective in the industry on what works and what doesn't work. And hopefully, we can share some of that with you today to help you in your endeavors as you move into always on marketing. So, what is always on marketing? There's lots of definitions of it, and I'll use it as a data-driven marketing as the definition to describe it. So, and I'll actually read the definition to you because I think it's important to unpack it a little bit. So, always on marketing is data-driven, content-led experiences delivered across channels and devices in real time. There's a lot of information packed into this statement. I'll spend a little bit of time unpacking it here for you. So, at its core, it's data-driven. You can have always on marketing. You can have evergreen programs that are out there that you can have some static content that people can get to, and that marketing could be there all the time. The key is that it's data-driven, that you are targeting that message based off of what you've learned about your customer, your consumer, and that it's content-led experiences. When we talk about experiences, we talk about experiences are the interactions that you have with your customers across any channels. We used to talk about visiting websites or interacting on a mobile app, but really we're talking about all the experiences. So any channel that you can connect with your customer, any channel where you can develop that relationship, where you can further that conversation, that's an experience. And you have to have the appropriate content, which is why those experiences are content-led. You have to have the right content. It has to be available to you, and you have to be able to deliver it across multiple channels and multiple devices. That's the fact that I want that experience to be seamless, that when you visit me on the website, I want you to recognize the conversation that we were having, and I should recognize the conversation that we were having. Once you move into the email channel, once you move into off of our site and you're in a paid media space, the seamlessness across channels is one of the key elements. And that's what makes data-driven marketing or always on marketing so exciting at this time. So Tom, here I think is a good point, good opportunity to pause for a moment and do our first poll.
Right, you are, Jack. And we will be having our poll. There is our poll now on the right side of your screen. Our poll question number 1, is your organization strong at delivering targeted experiences to online segments? Simply yes, no question. Is your organization strong at delivering targeted experiences to online segments? Yes or no? And please click the submit button. We want everybody to participate, so please take a moment to do that. Jack, any guesses how that's going to come out?
I think it's going to come out a little bit more than 50%. Probably 2/3 will say, yeah, we're doing that.
Well, we'll be seeing the results in just a moment here. Poll has ended, and we're waiting for the results to pop up now. By the way, Jack, don't feel bad about 2 decades. I'm into past my third, so you should be proud of your achievement, sir. Okay, now we have our results out here. Looks like the winning vote is no. People are here today to learn more about this. Good to know. About 42% said no, 14% said yes, and 44% did not participate. Folks, we want you to get back into the groove of things. So next poll we have, please do. Jack,
so that's
we're ready to go on. Oh, go ahead.
Yep, go ahead. It's a little bit of a surprising result, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But it indicates that what we have here is an educated audience that knows what they're getting into, which is probably why you've chosen to participate in the webinar today. So let's talk a little bit about what personalized experiences mean, because we asked the question, are you ready to deliver personalized experiences? And I think a lot of people think that they are, but then when they start to unpack what a personalized experience really means, it can become a little bit overwhelming. So when we look at personalized experiences, it's about leveraging everything that we know about a consumer. And I have my first party data. If you're a customer, I have the information. I know what products you've purchased. I know how recent those transactions were. I know the transaction types. If you're visiting on the website, I may know what's going on the website. I know what pages you visited, what brands you looked at. I know if you've done search, what search terms you did on the site. I know information about your technology. I know what browser you're using. I know if you're on a mobile device, on a tablet, on a desktop. I also to know information about what you've been exposed to in media, particularly digital media. I know if you've seen a brand campaign, or if you've seen a retargeting campaign, or if you've seen acquisition messages. I know which creatives they were. I know if you clicked on paid search. If I can bring all those together, that paints a very complete picture of you and our interactions in the past, which should lead to a very personalized experience on your next interaction. And you can see on the right where we have interactions on websites, we have interactions in email, we have interactions in paid media. And if we advance, so when that goes right, when that goes well, it's very good. So here we have the same information on the right, and this was for a client of ours that has a subscription product, and they have a subscription product with multiple tiers, and you can actually purchase products on top of that as well. So it's a monthly subscription with tiers, and you can purchase products. And we had been running digital media campaigns for them based off of website interactions, because that was the easiest place for us to track them. And we knew if they had an account, we knew what level that account was, and we could use that information to retarget them when they were off our site and visiting other digital properties. And we could send them advertising messages that were targeted based off of that limited information. We underwent the effort to bring in other data. We brought in offline information, offline purchase history. We brought in search behaviors. We brought in past campaign exposure, and we created some models and developed segments for them on what the opportunity was, what was the propensity to move up one level or two levels, or to add on additional products. And you can see the results on the right that we actually beat our programmatic optimization by about 7x. That ROI was very significant, and that was driven largely by the additional data sources that we brought in that enabled us to define and segment and choose the best message, and that we were able to send that information back out to our media partners so that we could deliver that message at the right time. And that's a pretty strong success story there. Which, let's pause for a moment now and ask the second poll question, Tom.
Right, you are, Paul. Right, you are, Jack. I just want to remind our readers, too, to submit questions at any time during the program. There's a lot of folks out there with a lot of questions on your mind, I'm sure. You can do that through our Q&A window, and we'll have those ready when we get to the Q&A session. Our second poll question is, does your organization have the templates, processes, and creative capability to use and reuse content for dynamic delivery? Again, it's a simple yes/no question. So please click one of those two buttons and hit the submit button. We'd like to see a percentage of participants go up this time. So please take a moment to do that on the right side of your screen now. Jack, my guess is most companies don't have all those features in place. Is that what you're expecting?
That was my expectation, and normally that was a surprise given the first result. But since this group is a little more educated, I expect we're going to have a vast majority saying, no, we're not ready for this.
There you go. Well, the results are more inclusive this time. We have about 25% saying they're not ready for it. About 20% saying they are. Still about half our audience is not participating in these polls, so it's a little bit skewed from that point of view, but I think it's still interesting to see that so many people are aware that there's things that they need to do right now. So Jack, why don't you take it away?
All right, thanks, Tom. So let me give an example now of when things go wrong, what happens. And this is a similar circumstance where we had a customer base that we wanted to get upgrade information out to, and we had been running advertising, similarly retargeting programs to them, where we were chasing them around in the internet, and we all know those examples of being chased around. You didn't buy those red shoes, and they follow you for months afterwards. And we were doing similar work with them to try and get people to upgrade into a better product. That actually performed pretty well, but we believed that based on the success that we had seen from other programs, like the example before where we had a 7x improvement on the ROI, that we could do much, much more with that if we brought in the extra data. And we brought in all the extra data. We brought in offline POS system information. We brought in search behavior. We brought in CRM activities. We brought that into a DMP, and a DMP is a data management platform, which I'll talk about a little bit later. We brought that in and we understood what the behaviors were, and we were able to define better segments and map good messages to them. But we were only able to find 1 million of our 10 million customers that we were addressable in the future. So out of the 10 million that I knew about, I could only find 1 million of them within the DMP partner, which they were able to identify where they were out in the wild in the digital spaces. But the client, as they executed this one, they actually wanted to restrict it and go to just a single publisher rather than a large advertising network. So we actually, out of the 10 million people where we were able to identify and optimize messages to them, we could only actually deliver that message to 1,000 customers. And that's for those 1,000 customers, our rates were pretty good. We had a 3x improvement over the average rates that we'd seen in the past. But the inability to connect, we brought the data in, we were able to analyze it, but the inability to deliver that data back out, to connect it to the channels and the experiences that I was delivering, significantly limited the success of that campaign or that effort. And so what we see is that very few businesses, and it sounds like everyone on the webinar today is in agreement, that few businesses are equipped to compete in real time, struggling with basic technology, and struggling with the marketing program design themselves. And certainly that example of what can go wrong highlighted that. So we wanted to look at and see what is the readiness in the marketplace. How are companies stacking up in their ability to deliver data-driven marketing or always-on marketing? So we did a survey in partnership with Adobe to reach out, and we interviewed some 680 C-level marketing technology and business executives. This was a global sample across multiple industries, and we actually have done this survey 2 years in a row to look at how the readiness of companies to do data-driven marketing. And what we found is that, and I'll walk through it, and we've taken a few industries here and aggregated the answers together for sharing. And for those of you that have downloaded the white paper, which was part of the registration process, I think you'll be familiar with some of these responses. What we found is that when we asked, are you strong at delivering targeted experiences? We saw 60% or so of the market said, yeah, we can do that, which is why in that first poll question, I expected the yes responses to be a little bit higher, because across industries, across verticals, across geographies, the marketers, the technologists, and the C-level folks that we interviewed said, yeah, we can do that. But when we started to drill into some details, just like we did a little bit ago, and we started to ask specific questions about how they were doing that. We asked them if they had the templates and processes to do dynamic delivery. Those numbers plummeted from the over 50 to 60% down to less than a quarter. Said they were able to do that, which is why on that second poll question, I expected the no's to fairly much dominate that response. We asked them if they had an ecosystem for delivering the dynamic content. And again, it was in that mid-20s and lower for some industries. And we asked them if they had the capability to deliver targeted experiences to a recognized customer. Can you recognize the customer, and can you deliver a targeted piece of content to them, regardless of it being dynamic or not? And again, those responses were incredibly low. So although the participants that we talked to thought that they were delivering targeted experiences, when you start to ask them about the technology and their capability to actually do it, it starts to break down a little bit. But then we asked them, do you want to be able to do, in particular, the dynamic marketing, the dynamic targeting, the dynamic messaging? And do you even have success metrics and defined to do that, to measure it? Then we got those responses pop back up. So when you look at this in whole, the desire is there. The ability to begin defining, measuring, and tracking what that success looks like is there. But the ability to deliver, the ability to execute it is what's lagging right now. So that will bring us to the third poll question, Tom.
Great. And the third poll question is your organization in the early stages of defining targeting success metrics? Is your organization in the early stages of defining targeting success metrics? Jack, those last couple of slides were really interesting and I think they really show how people are learning about this process. So while we wait for folks to cast their votes on the right window there and click the submit button, I just want to tell you that I was really intrigued with that learning process. I imagine you see a lot of that.
It is, and if I were trying to predict this poll response, given that we've been opposite of what I've seen, I'm going to say that this group feels like they're not really ready to measure success.
I think that's probably pretty fair to say. Our answer should be recorded any time now, and then we'll see the poll results in just a minute. How long ago were some of those slides going back, Jack? Were we talking 3-4 years, or where Razorfish was doing those early experiments?
Some of the early experiments go back 5, 6, 7 years. And I think these results, and Seth can probably jump in and address those specifically, but I believe that those were within the last 1 year and 2 years.
Great.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, we're just waiting for the results, and here they are. Let's see if I can get over to the percentages here. Is your organization in the early stages of defining targeting success metrics? 30% say yes, 16% say no. About half are still standing on the sidelines, a little over half. So that gives a little more background on our audience, Jack, and I'll let you go on with your presentation at this point.
Well, thank you, Tom, and that puts me 0 for 3 on predicting the poll responses. So my predictive analytics are not working well today, are they?
No, it's not. I think it just shows the state of flux that we're in this industry. A lot of people learning a lot of things, and it's very hard to predict what people know and what people don't right now.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So what we found in our survey is that most companies are in the early stages. When you look at their readiness and their progression along the path, the majority of people said they're in the early stages of defining targeting and success metrics. A smaller number have the ability to recognize returning prospects and customers, and that it drops about from 60 to 40%. An even smaller number are using integrated behavioral data in their current marketing segmentation. So we have people want to get there. They're starting to think about the metrics for it. They're not always able to identify their targets and segments, their prospects. They're doing very little in the way of segmentation, and then they don't rank themselves as well in being able to recognize their segments and measure the results. So you can see that, again, this highlights that there's a lot of desire. There have been initial steps taken, but there's a lot of room to go to reach that ability to deliver targeted experiences in a dynamic fashion. So where are they falling short? When we looked in the surveys and in the communications, both through the survey and communications with some of our client bases, we found that there's 5 consistent areas of challenges. The first is kind of a governance process area, which is there's a lack of a roadmap. There's no formalized roadmap, which leads to undisciplined forays into the technology and into the marketing. And there's a lack of buy-in across the organization. A lot of times initiatives to do dynamic, data-driven dynamic messaging will come out of one small group. It might come out of the digital media arm of a company, but you actually have to involve a lot of people. Your IT group will be involved, operations will be involved, retail stores might be involved. It creates a lot of challenge if you don't have that buy-in across the organization to actually get the product up off the ground. The second thing we see is the gaps in the technology itself. And that's where partners like Adobe, partners like other partner providers can help bridge that gap. But you have both your internal legacy systems where you primarily store your customer information, your transactional information, and then you have your marketing delivery stack, which typically consists of an email provider, a CRM tool, a campaign manager, maybe an advertising, an ad server. These were all likely brought in separately. They live in silos. We need to put them together into an integrated stack to enable driving a data-driven marketing program. And we find that those connections between those pieces tends to be a major gap. And there is often major misses in some core features of technology that you need to be able to deliver this. The third area is the actual analytics, the ability to predict who a customer is, identify them with the data, define the segments that they belong into, do the propensity models to understand which message is most likely to move them to the next level. That is a primary gap that we see. The fourth area is the channels themselves. So, and that's harkens back to the example of we're integrated pretty well. We did the analytics, but we didn't have enough delivery back into the channels, so to deliver the messages back out to our customers, and that tends to be an area where there's a challenge to deliver. We see that, for example, in retargeting, we do that through display ads, but now people are more interested in doing video delivery. Can my systems also handle that delivery through a video channel? Can it do it on the mobile channel when I've been doing it very well on websites? Those are the types of gaps that we see in channels. And then finally, and this may be one of the biggest one of all, is the content. To really deliver personalized experiences, you need a lot of content. We have a client that had, at one point in time, they had over 1,000 segments. Then they, of course, couldn't manage all of them, so they bundled them down into just 5 individual segments. But how do you create content that's going to reach out to those 1,000 different customer segments? How do you make enough content so that you can manage that experience? One of the keys to doing that is to simplify your segmentation, so that going from that 1,000 segments to 5 segments, but now instead of creating 1,000 pieces of content, I'm creating 50 pieces of content. But even creating 50 pieces of content for all the various channels can be very challenging, and it actually ends up being fairly labor intensive. That is an area where we often see companies failing in the execution. So the solution around it then is to begin by developing a roadmap. And we've created what we call our PACES framework that lets you go from just having data to delivering target experiences. And the PACES framework kind of lines up with those 5 challenge areas. The first is platform. The P is for platform, which is how we collect the data, how we aggregate it and make it available for deployment. The analytics piece, which is how we turn those insights into understanding what the messages should be to deliver. The channels is always challenging, not only because there's so many challenges, but the channels evolve and change all the time. We have done a good job of bringing in CRM channels. We've done a good job of bringing in digital media channels. Obviously, our own experiences, whether they're websites or mobile sites or mobile apps, are integrated in well. But what do we do with the new emerging social channels? And what do we do when those channels change, which we know that they do all the time? The experiences themselves is another area for evaluation that needs to be identified in your roadmap. How are you going to create the brand experiences? How are you going to drive all the content that you need, that you can engage with your customer across the channels and across their journey? And then finally, the strategy piece, which is the governance, the process and leadership. How do you organize for success across your organization, across the disciplines, across your partners, to drive data-driven marketing forward? So platforms is a primary area, and for the platforms, there's a number of ways that you can slice it and dice it, but we think that the DMP is the key. That is the primary area where you're bringing the data together and aggregating. And again, the DMP stands for Data Management Platform, and it is the kernel that allows you to identify your customers and your prospects, recognize them across the channels and the interactions that you've had across the channel, let you aggregate that information together, assign personalization rules, whether it's a segmentation or it's a propensity score, that I then can deliver back out to my channel, so that I can deliver that next best message in the right channel, that I can deliver that personalized content out to them. And it may be a bias coming from a data background, but I think data is the cornerstone of that. The analytics, once you have that data in there, how do you define your segments? And this is where you can see that I have lifestyle segments in there, but we've also added in demographic segments and regional segments and engagement segments. And all those data elements together create a rich segmentation strategy that will let you map the content to the recipients through sophisticated decisioning engines. So it may be that I have a lifestyle segment it may be that I have a lifestyle segment of an urban roadie, foodie, or a techie, but I'm going to have to customize that message a little bit depending on whether west or east because of the marketing situations. And for those that are hearing noise, I apologize for that. I don't know where the source is, but I will try and keep movement down to a minimum so that you can hear clearly. But the analytics is the part that lets you identify the customer and know what to say to them. And the channels, and I mentioned this in the is complex and ever evolving. And you can just see a snapshot on the right there. And this is only in the paid digital channel of the complexity that lives inside of there. There's networks and there's DSPs, which do bidded media. There's the social delivery mechanisms. There's video delivers. There's mobile delivers. To truly be able to deliver targeted, personalized experiences, you have to not only be able to identify who they are in the segment that you want them to be in or the message that you want to give to them, but you have to let all these partners on the right know what message you want to deliver because they're actually doing the final stage delivery of that message. You take that and expand that complexity into the other channels, expand that into CRM, expand that into your own property delivery, expand that into publishing. And you can imagine how complex that gets and where a technology platform partner that has already done that integration can be very valuable for you. And the experiences side, and again, you look at the right. So on the left here now, I've done the work of defining the segments, of doing a personalization, and there's a rules engine that delivers that. But on the right side, having the content, the right content, so that I can actually deliver the right message to the customer is critical. And this is where there's a lot of effort that's required. And I think of data-driven marketing today and the platforms that are out there as being kind of a promise like CRM was in the past, where there was a promise of technology coming in and allowing you to do this and being a cost-saving effort. And for those of us that went through CRM implementations in the past, we found out that there wasn't really a cost saving, there was a cost shift. We moved away from having heavy technical demands to be able to deliver messages to having demands into strategy, into marketing, into content production. And I think we'll see the same sort of thing here as data-driven marketing becomes more highly adopted as people deploy the platforms, that what'll happen is you'll see a reduction in the need for technical support, but you'll see an increase in the need for creative branding strategy support to drive those messages out. And that's really brings us to the end here. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, which is great. But in summary, what we have seen with both through our surveys over the last couple of years and through conversations with our clients and in industry events such as this, is that there is a big demand to deliver the data-driven marketing experiences, the always-on marketing. And there's a desire to see the realization of the promise of big data. And companies are very interested in doing that. They're making the first steps towards it, but there's a lot of gaps in the details of how you make that happen. There's a lot of gaps of readiness for it, of understanding the complexity of the analytics and segmentation required. There's challenges in the connection to the communication touch points through the channels. There's challenge in the organizational structures themselves, that most organizations still live in silos, and paid media lives separately from user experiences, whether they're site or mobile, that live separately from retail operations, that live separately from IT, and all those need to be bridged to make this work going forward. And that to be very successful in combining all those pieces together, in being able to create the content that's necessary, to really be able to do that, you need to have a strategic framework in place, something like our PACES framework, that lets you set out a roadmap of how we can get to the next level with that. And with that, Tom, I think that closes up the information that I wanted to share, and we're ready to open this up for Q&A.
Super, Jack, and really an interesting presentation and some really great ideas out there. I'm glad to see that. If the host will give me the control back on the slides, I'll move forward. And I want to apologize to our listeners if you're hearing some background noise. There's a little bit of sounds like typing going on in the background, and we're going to see if we can straighten that out as we move forward. Now it is time for your questions. If you have a question in mind, and who doesn't on the subject, please submit it through the Q&A module right now. We'll be glad to field your questions. Our producers will put them into line, and we'll get to them right now. And we're going to be bringing Seth back in for this part of the program. Seth Garsky, please make sure you're ready to join us, and let's go to our questions. First one comes from listener Trevor Attridge. How do you manage the message sequencing across channels, especially when your customers occupy multiple places, not all of which you can control in a timely fashion? That's kind of the key question, isn't it, Jack?
That is indeed, and that is a tricky one to address. There's a couple of pieces of that. One is you have to have the strategy in place to know how you want to sequence the message first. And that we actually find that a number of clients fall down at that part. A number of clients believe that our customers are following some sort of linear journey. You know, they've got this message mapping lined up where there's message 1, message 2, message 3, and it flows all the way through, regardless of the channels that it's going into. And that, as we all know, is really not the reality. That customers move around in circles. The journey's not linear. It's a big, confusing, swirly gig of travel. So the first challenge is to make sure that you've defined your messaging sequencing in a way that follows your consumers. Now, the second part of that is how do I, even if they were linear, how do I track that, and how do I sequence them across? And that really comes at the DMP level. If I'm able to get all those interactions across channels, bring those in and organize them, and I can do that for a lot of channels. And for those channels that I can bring into the DMP and I can tie those together, that works very well. There have been a number of challenges recently because a lot of that tying happens at a cookie level. And as we all know, the cookies are becoming harder and harder to use as a tracking device as the modern browsers are shipping out with do not track already established. We've been working with a couple of technology partners to look at cookie-less tracking to tie the various data streams from the channels together to get a clearer picture. So that's one part of it, is having the right DMP in place and making sure that the data elements that you're using to stitch those communications together are working and they're complete. But there will always be channels that are blind to you, or you're not able to tie in nice and cleanly. And for those, what you have to do is plan your messaging so that you have what we call the cold state, that you have a cold state.
Jack, we've lost you there for a sec. Come in, Jack Lynch. I think Jack's microphone might have gotten offline here. Seth, I think I'll bring you in on this and see if you have any thoughts on this subject.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're just coming through loud and clear, Seth.
Great. I know, and I think where Jack was going is what with the cold state, or what we found is kind of keeping the linear idea a little bit more broad. So we'll have maybe high-level branded kind of ad campaigns and that focus more on awareness and getting people into that marketing funnel, and then we'll move them further down into like a trial or we know they've already purchased, and sort of creating that, and then moving into more of a relationship sort of marketing focus. And we've done that with success, and that's just really, again, gets back to that DMP and making sure as people move through that process or that flow or that customer life cycle, we're just updating what segment they fit into within the DMP, and that's kind of how we manage it. So hopefully that answers that question.
That's a good answer, and thanks for stepping in there.
Yeah.
I hope Jack will be back with us shortly. He's not back yet, I don't think.
Are you able to hear me now?
Jack? Yeah, Jack, there you are. Are you back on the mic there? I
believe I am, yes.
We were hearing quite a bit of background noise just before you went off, and I wonder if the connection is loose on that or something. But I think Seth filled in admirably for you there.
Thank you, Seth.
So let's go to a next question, and I'll let Jack take the lead on this, or Seth, you feel free to jump in. Which industries do you see doing DDM best, and why do you think this is?
That's a good question, and I'll start with the industries that I think are not doing it well at all. And those automotive and financial services do not do a very good job of DDM. Financial services, because they're concerned about regulatory frameworks and data sharing and privacy issues. Automotive, I'm not sure why they're not good at it, but probably because they're such traditional brand marketers at heart, they have a hard time moving into and investing in the technology infrastructures to do that. Where I think it's going well is in the commerce partners. So retail partners that have large e-commerce presences that have online transactions are already well equipped to deliver targeted messages while you're on site when you're shopping. They generally have robust CRM campaigns already in place. So they have a lot of the infrastructure pieces together, and they tend to have had a lot of work already invested in understanding customer segments and messages. And they also have a rich amount of content available based off of pulling information in from the product catalogs that really enables them to get into DDM fairly quickly.
Great. Another question from Trevor. He bases this on our second poll today. The people who have the capability for dynamic delivery, are they using it effectively?
And that is really interesting. And I think the majority of clients that I've engaged with and at the beginning stages, the answer is no, they are not using it effectively at all. And a large part of that is defining segments, or they don't understand really what the journeys are and what the motivating factors are. So they're not bringing messages to them correctly. Some of it is that they don't have the content available, so they're not marrying the content to it. But what you see is it, kind of like that retargeting example that I mentioned before, is that you're seeing kind of a sledgehammer approach to what should be a really fine, granular tool, and you see that DDM is used to essentially chase you around the web with that pair of red shoes, and there's not a lot more sophistication than that that's applied into it. And some of that actually might also just be resources on the client side, the ability to create the content, to do the strategies, to plan out the messages, gets overwhelming. You spent all your effort in getting the technology up and working, and didn't spend the time investing in the strategy and the content. Very similar to what we saw in the past with CRM implementations.
You know, the content is interesting to me, being since I'm a content guy, but I think also there's just this enormous learning curve. This is a new medium, and it takes practitioners a long time to figure out exactly what they should be doing and how they should be doing it. And I think that's where your partners, your digital media partners, really come in and provide that kind of support. Do you think that's right, Jack? Do you think maybe 5 years from now people will be a lot better at this?
I think we will. There's no doubt about it. The one caveat, the one question is going to be is that the channels are evolving so much and the technologies are evolving so much that we may end up in this perpetual trying to catch up to what's possible stage.
Yeah, that's a really great thought. Okay, Jack, you talked about creating personalization rules down in the DMP and then federating scores and attributes out to the channel delivery tiers. Adobe, Sitecore, and other marketing automation vendors are out in the market demonstrating personalization in their web CMS or marketing automation platforms. How do you typically recommend blending in these capabilities?
It's a case-by-case approach, and it really depends on what other infrastructure you have in place. So, and actually, Seth might actually be able to talk about this, because that first example where we were reaching out across multiple channels, I think Seth actually went through some of these challenges and experienced it firsthand.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where the DMP comes into play. Is it's really having one system for that kind of is the truth, of the segments, and then that's kind of your one centralized hub, and then that reaches out to the different channels. So, working with the CMS and Sitecore is a great example where that's more of what I think of as the channel side versus kind of what the DMP would be where all your analytics and the logic lives. they really work together in my mind.
Good. Well, good answers, guys. Next question. And we do have plenty of time for questions. So if you have another one on your mind, if you're out there in the audience, clear strength at delivering targeted experiences lower versus the financial industry and others.
I believe that I believe that it's been primarily because CPG does not have a lot of money to invest in the infrastructure to deliver. I think that they also have higher aspirations on being able to deliver it. If you think of CPG marketers, they tend to be brand marketers at heart. They attend lots of trade conferences, right? They get very inspired by what the possibilities are with big data. But when they get back to it, the reality is that they're spending a lot of money on their traditional advertising. They're having a hard time getting capital investments to enable the type of communications that we're talking about. And they recognize that frustration. So I think the CPGs rating themselves a little bit lower comes from having a higher understanding of what's possible and a desire to do it, but having some business constraints that are preventing them from investing and moving forward.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think one of the things we don't talk a lot about is the economic changes and the cost of these systems. And I think the cost of doing this kind of marketing is probably going to drop in the years to come. Maybe we'll see a change in that tide. Fred asks, what are some of the typical initial steps to becoming more of a real-time marketing organization? He says we're looking for some attainable early targets that will validate this approach. That's probably something a lot of people are looking for.
Yeah, that's great, and we usually counsel our clients as they're moving into this is to identify what the early wins are so that you can justify the investment further going down the road. So really some of the early wins that are available are the channels that are already well integrated into the system. So that would be doing dynamic personalization on your website. That would be doing it in your CRM program, doing it in a limited channel through the digital marketing. So doing it through retargeting in particular. Those are all areas where you can get out fairly quickly and deliver some successes. And I'd like to open that up to Seth as well to see if he has some specific examples that he thinks worked well.
Yeah, and I think one client in particular, their program, and they were pretty advanced, but we were able to take kind of what they had already built and move it into the media side. And so, email is such a great channel, but the challenges there is it's typically not scalable. And so we were able to take a lot of the learnings and the knowledge that we had around their customer base and then move it into the display world and really go out and reach a much broader audience with the stuff that they already had in place.
Okay, great. The next question is, we've often seen that personalization or predictive is challenging to model, requires a fair bit of conjecture, and often doesn't yield the expected results. Often working with ABN testing seems like a better investment of resources. Is there a breaking point that forces you from one model to another? What are your thoughts about this? And I'd like to hear from both of you on that question.
Yeah, and I'll jump in first. I think that you don't choose one or the other. I think you work in conjunction across the two. And my philosophy is that you use the segmentation and personalization to identify the buckets of content that you want to bring to your individual segments, right? So what are the types of content that I need to deliver, and how do I bring that forward? But I want to create enough content that I can then do the testing to optimize the message. But if you open up the door and just say, I'm going to optimize the message without having some structure and framework for how you're creating that content, how you're organizing the content, how you're evaluating the content, what's the metadata, the characteristics that you're going to use to describe the content. I think those are driven a lot by the segmentation types of work and the personalization type of work that you have out there. So that the segmentation and the personalization guidelines that you have and the message mapping that you've done identify what types of content you want to test. But I really think it's not an either or, it's a yes and approach to developing and delivering that content.
Great. Seth, you want to take a crack at that one?
No, I definitely agree. I mean, I think like an example I can think of is if we, a client might have a segment where they're existing customers versus new customers, and we might talk to those two different segments very differently, right? And then within those two segments, I'd want to test out my content and my messaging against both those segments separately. And so I think again, it's using both.
Okay, great. Now the next question: most marketing departments we see are under-resourced. How commonly do you see people buying tools that they ultimately don't use well or to their full extent? And how do you recommend avoiding that? I don't think any marketing department really has a lot of money to waste right now, and some of these tools are pretty expensive. So how can they minimize that kind of waste?
Yeah, that's great. So we do see that often, and again, I hearken that back to prior large technology deployments where there's a lot of investment in systems and tools, a lack of resources to deliver that, and ultimately projects are deemed as unsuccessful because you don't see the return that you expected against it. I think the way to avoid that really is to do the upfront work, to do the roadmap work, to do the strategy work, to get buy-in across the organization so that you can get the resources committed to it. One way to do that is with those quick wins, those early wins, where if you have the roadmap lined up, you have a couple of pilot projects that show the value, you can get the organization to commit to delivering greater resources so that you can carry on into the more detailed deployment. I don't know, Seth, if you would agree on that.
No, definitely. I think that's the big key is having a solid roadmap, and then also, a plan for after you go through that initial phase of how do you scale it and really grow the program too. That's the other piece that I think a lot of people forget about.
It's really interesting. We just had a story on CMSWire today. IDC released a pair of studies. The first one showed that marketing budgets are rising about 3.5% this year, which is close to the rise in revenue for companies. And it's the first time in 8 years that has been close to the revenue gain. And the second study was also interesting. It talked to the skills of CMOs and noted that the CMOs in a study of technology companies, large technology companies, had an average tenure of less than 2 years, which is a real drop. There'd been another study by Spencer Stewart recently that put it at almost double that. So that's a big drop, and I think it shows that companies are really looking for these kinds of skills and this kind of expertise. Jack, are you seeing increases in budgets in the companies you're talking to, and are you seeing new faces pop up on the scene?
We're seeing both more investment, and that's really over the last couple of years, we're starting to see the investment. And we're starting to see kind of that blended role of that CMO CTO hybrid. Whether it's somebody who has a joint reporting responsibility to both sides of the table, or whether it's a new position that's being created, and we've seen that with a few clients where it's no longer there's a chief marketing technologist role. We've been seeing that start to happen, and I think we're going to see that come as a trend and accelerate in the future.
One of our listeners picked up on that too and is asking, what kind of time do you think a medium to large DDM program actually takes to roadmap with budgets and build and validate and grow? It seems like this would exceed the average tenure of the CMO at this point, which is a fair point to learn this new process and this new approach, although time is of the essence.
It definitely, it's not a quick process, and you can begin to see some initial benefits, 6 months into the process, but to really get the full benefits is probably 18 to 24 months before you're really seeing it click across all the channels, and you really actually have some results that you can measure and validate and prove to everybody. And that is definitely longer than, even if the average CMO tenure now is 3 years, they probably came in and spent the first 6 to 12 months getting the initiative off the ground. And now you've got 2 years until you've got a large scale positive returns to show for it that is generally outlasting the CMO, which is why it's important to have the organizational buy-in, that it's not just marketing that is driving this, that technology's bought into it, that the business owners are all bought into it, so that there's investment across the organization, so you're outlasting any individual marketing expert, and you're outlasting any individual campaign or initiative that's living out there. This needs to be a customer first focus, and it needs to be across the organization to really give it the time and attention that it needs to succeed.
That idea of having this across the organization is something that comes up a lot in the articles I do and the conversations I have. And it starts at the bottom and it goes to the very top. And Kathleen Schaub, who wrote this IDC study today, noted that there's a real need for the CEO to step in and learn more about what marketing is doing and to support the CMO. Are you seeing CEOs taking a more active role in the marketing plans and strategies at this point?
We're seeing that a little bit mixed among our clients, where we're seeing that they're definitely involved in the investments more. About half of the CEOs we talk with are more involved in the actual execution, the strategies behind it. Some are more involved in the investment and the returns. But we do see across the board that all CEOs are more interested in owning the customer relationship better and understanding the customers better and the prospects better, and are really interested in how to leverage their data for a strategic advantage. And that DDM is one of the key ways in which you can take advantage of your data and use that as an advantage over competitors. And so we're seeing a lot of investment or interest from the CEO suite in that area.
That's good. I think that'll lead to more productive discussions at budget time, which I know a lot of our listeners are probably facing right now. I think we're at the end of our program here. Well, I want to thank Jack Lynch and Seths Garski for being with us today. It's been a great presentation. And of course, our deep thanks to our friends at Razorfish for sponsoring today's event. This webinar has been recorded. The video and recap article will be emailed to you shortly, probably by Monday, and available on CMSWire. If your company is interested in sponsoring a webinar, please email us at advertising@cmswire.com. I want to extend our thanks to our production staff today. They had a few hiccups to deal with in terms of the background noise. I apologize again to our audience for that, but I think it came out very well. A lot of great points, very good slides today, Jack. Thank you for that.
All right, thank you.
I want to thank our audience for being with us today, and for CMSWire and Simpler Media, for Adobe and Razorfish. This is Tom Murphy signing off. Thank you.